Hi and welcome to Outlaw Bookseller with me, Stephen Lee Andrews, writer, bookseller, collector, and just make an adjustment there. And today I want to show you a new book which was published in the USA probably a few weeks ago. It's just been published in the UK on, I think it's the very end of August. And this is, as you see, Worlds Beyond Time, Sci-Fi Art of the 1970s. Now, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know that I cannot stand the term sci-fi. And if you're wondering about that, really the fact is that professionals in the field, especially if they're over a certain age, always use SF. They don't use sci-fi. There is a video about that on the channel which caused a bit of controversy. And what I did to sort of highlight the fact that SF was a professional usage was asked a load of professionals on social media, and I cut and pasted their replies, and they came out in favour of SF. So I will say with a caveat that first of all, this book, because of that, and I know it sounds pedantic, but people really did respond to it very strongly, and the people who were anti-SF and pro-sci-fi were every bit as vehement as everybody else. So I just wanted to put that back in the arena briefly, and that has put me off this book a lot, because I think that Adam Rowe put it together. He's done a good job, but his text to me is what's lacking. But we'll have a look at the pictures, and this is Trantor course, which is where Foundation starts, and it's very good on information about the artists, and really nice. It's published by Abrams. Now, Abrams are one of my favourite American publishers. They're fundamentally an art publisher, and there's a Pennington there, and I've always really liked their work and what they've done. But I was in two minds about this. I prefer monographs where there's a focus on one artist, but it's got a forward by Vincent DeFate, which is very good, who is an SF artist. And I thought, well, it's not too expensive. It comes in at £30, so that's not bad. So we thought we'd have a look through it, and I'll show you in depth what it's like. So yeah, it's nice. And it says, end papers front. All of the Earth bears witness to a violent destruction of a spaceship on Dean Ellis's striking 1979 paper cover projections. Now, the fact is, what he should have said was rear of front free end paper is what the book said. It just says end papers. Those are the end papers. That's the rear of the front free end paper. So it does rather fall down on some of the detail like that in terms of the editorial, which is not like Abrams, so which is a shame really. And it works thematically. There's an introduction by Vincent E. Fate. And the main problem I would say with the book, aside from the fact that Rowe, I think he's actually more interested in the art than the actual books, is that the thematic approach is interesting, but it often contains things which don't really fit the bill, because it says sci-fi art of the 1970s, and you know, that's pretty broad. It's mostly book covers. There are some comic things. This is a comic thing from a comic called Dope Rider, apparently, which is in High Times. We know what High Times is. And fundamentally, the big issue with this is there's loads of stuff in it which isn't from the 70s. There's 80s stuff in here. So he drifts off a lot. And some of the artists, I think, who should have had more space, like, I don't think there's really a Jim Burns double page in this, which is quite something. It is good, as I say, on a lot of the detail about the artists, and it's quite a nice book. I don't know whether I'll keep it in the collection because, as I say, I tend to prefer monographs, but it is, you know, beautifully done. But if you want to know about some of the artists who you hear less about, like Richard M. Powers, for example, here, it is really good. And that one there, I really like that one, is the cover for the Anthology 3 from out there from 1959. And that's now on the Library of America, one of the Library of America SF omnibuses, which I've got. And really nice. So, you know, you do get to see it. The only problem, I think, is the book could have been a bit bigger in format. It's a comfortable size, as you can see. But to do the art justice, it really needs more full page spread. So it's not as big as, say, the Hardware book by Chris Foss, or some of the Jim Burns monographs which have been out there. So, but it is good in showing you some of the more unusual things. I mean, I like that one there, which is for Robert Silverberg's Hawksbill Station, which is a book I've read a couple of times, both in the short story version and in the full-length novel. And that's really good. It's a good story, Hawksbill, actually. It's very austere. So, yeah. That's an unusual, interesting artist. So he goes back into this Dope Rider thing. And of course, a lot of the time it's what they can get the rights to. But you know, it is one of those things where one of the interesting things about people collecting vintage paperbacks is, I noticed through my interactions online with it, is that a lot of people seem to be more seduced by the art than anything else, and it's the period feel of the art that draws them in rather than the content. For me, I've always liked, you know, SF cover art. I do like it a lot, and I'm a big fan of some things which are relatively sort of cheesy and cliched. Like the classic example is the sort of Panther edition of 334 by Tom Dish, which has a spaceship on it, and you know, this is a book which is entirely set in New York, you know, so there is that thing going on. 2-page spread about Galileo magazine, which I felt was rather a lot for a magazine which wasn't that important, I didn't think. And yeah, so as you see, if you want to look at the lives of some of the artists, it's really quite interesting. Leo and Deanne Dillon, I mean, they really deserve a monograph of their own. There's R.A. Lafferty's Past Master from the Ace special, and there's an anecdote that I read that Harlan Ellison wrote about how he was staying with them, and one night, I think it was Diane, fell asleep at the drawing board, and Leo got up in the morning and he finished the line she was halfway through, and Ellison said you could not see where it had been done, which is amazing. But yeah, this stuff's great. It'd be good to see a monograph. So I think I'd like to see more monographs. So as you see, you've got different themes here. I'm just going to do a whistle stop through it really, so you can have a look at it and get a full idea. Foss, obviously there, that's from the cover of the SF Encyclopedia, which is one of my favourite books of all time, possibly my favourite book of all time in its first edition. I'd love a hardcover of that. They used to be around, now they're very rare. Stuart Cowley obviously is quite Foss influenced, and that's on the cover of Beyond Apollo edition I've got, which is really nice, Malmsberg. So yeah, so you've got all sorts of things. It's a lovely book, as you can see. I just don't think a lot of the text. I mean, there's one point in it, Ringworld, Niven, where Rowe says about, oh, SF is what they called sci-fi in the 70s, and it's like, yeah, but that's what professionals call it. So I'm sorry to belabor a point here, but it does really bug me. And as I say, it's strange, people get really defensive about it, and in a way it sort of shows what Michael Moorcock said, which was that sometimes, you know, the most conservative science fiction fans are the most conservative people of all. And you know, so there we go. So as I say, pros, especially old pros, will use SF, not sci-fi. Malmsberg again on A Planet Alien, that was on an NEL, and that's Childhood's End from the Pan Lozenge. Yeah, so it's nice to see some of this. I mean, obviously it's nice to see that really big, because the NEL paperback's on really crappy paper, and that's really nice. So that's a favourite of mine, Tim White, for Gather Darkness, Fritz Lieber, and that was an NEL as well. And that's, I love that flying saucer picture. I really, really do. It's great. These little guys in the foreground there. Tim White, Michael Whelan, Jim Burns, probably my favourites. Peter Elson's really good. Yeah, you don't see much of John Berkey's stuff. It's kind of impressionistic. It's interesting. Space Elevators. John Harris I like. I mean, there has been a monograph of John Harris's stuff, which is really nice. I should pick that up. Spaceships and Planets. Just kind of like a thrown together, isn't it really, Vincent de Fate stuff, which is nice. You know, you see the influences of people like Foss throughout. See, this is Peter Ellis, and that's 1971, and that's so 1950s, isn't it? You know, so there you go. Lovely. Yeah, and there's Michael Whelan for Martian Chronicles. I've got that edition. Beautiful. Tells you about the canals, a trope born of a misunderstanding. Well, yeah, that's good. I can do that. Underwater. How about submarine or submerged? Underwater. He's not really a very eloquent writer in terms of his prose, I would say, really. But you know, the stuff about the artist is really good. You know, writing about art is difficult, to be fair. Skull Planets, you know, and that's Great Pennington there from Science Fiction Hall of Fame Volume 2, which is a fantastic anthology, which I've got and read many times. Great stuff. There we go. And you see, he's even got this. I mean, that's from the record cover of Oxygen, which I bought that when it first came out. Great, great record sleeve, that. So I could whip it out and show it to you, but there you go. Asimov's Foundation series. I'm rereading Foundation at the moment. Now, this is what I'm saying about the problem here, is that those are 1980s covers, not 1970s. So my view is, if you're going to call a book 1970s, you've got to stick to it, you know, is this the thing? Dean Ellis. I like Angus McKee a lot. That's from the Stableford, one of the Hooded Swan books, and that's from Roger Elwood's Future City. Really, really nice. I like the sort of quasi-crystalline quality of his Fosse-esque visions. So really good. So as you see, it's quite nice. But the text has put me off, so I'm trying to sort of avoid the text really and enjoy the pictures. David A. Hardy. I don't know if there's ever been a Hardy monograph. I think there has. It's interesting. I mean, that's from the cover of Interzone, the magazine, 1989. And Interzone was once described as a pallid successor to New Worlds. And it began sort of that way. There's nothing pallid about it. It was good. But by the end of the 80s, the Gene Rats had come on. If you haven't watched the Gene Rats video on the channel, please do. And, you know, so you got a very conventional thing on the cover because it was the new space opera renaissance. So back to the 1930s. Here we go again. That same old, same old. Yeah. Robert McCall I could probably live without. But yeah, it's a lovely book. So as you see, if you like your science fiction art, then it's worth looking at. Jeffrey Catherine Jones. Cryosleep. Skeletons and spacesuits. So, you know, the themes, some of them are a little bit, you know, tenuous or off. There's more Malmsberg again. Gunfights in space. Space helmet reflections. I mean, one of the best ones of those is one of the Penguin Jeffrey Hoyle ones, isn't it? So the themes, in a way, they are kind of thrown together. And at the end of the day, what you're looking at is, do you think the book has enough quality in terms of the art? And as I say, I'm in two minds about it. Peter Alston's work, I think, is fantastic. This is Pebble in the Sky, Asimov, which is his first novel. This is a Sphere edition. And he used to be as common as muck. And now I can't find a decent one anywhere. And I really love that jacket design. And it's interesting, on it they use the same fonts as Panther were using to make it look like a panther, because Panther are mostly Asimov's, just Asimov, Pebble in the Sky. And I love that title. I've got a hardcover reissue of that. That's from a Harry Harrison anthology called Nova. I've got a full set of those. But yeah, Alston is good, you know, I like Alston's stuff. Very Fosse-esque again. So I used to hate Chris Foss, but they've really grown on me over the years. Frank Kelly Freas, obviously that was adapted for the Queen album, News of the World. This is the sort of art I don't like, too sort of graphic novel-y, not my sort of thing. Robert Tinney's Byte magazine covers, well, you know, it's about PCs, you know, it's not science fiction art, it really isn't. Freas again, I mean, Freas obviously is sort of, you know, goes way back. That's from again from a Stableford book. I really like that. That's on the cover of Red Tide by D.D. Chapman and Dolores Lehman Tarzan, which is in a couple of videos I've done recently. It's going to be in an Ace one, and I've mentioned it. And it looks like Creature in Black Lagoon. It's a lot more melodramatic than what actually happens in the book, even though the theme is there. So, you know, it is a good. It's nice to see these things. I love this. I mean, how can you not love that? I mean, we all love cats. Most of us do anyway. And that's from Decision at Duna by Anne McCaffrey. NEL. Isn't that fantastic? McCaffrey, very sort of cheesy sort of romance style writer, I find. Good ideas sometimes though. And of course there's the classic wraparound from the NEL Dune. You know, I've got a mint copy of that. The Fremen and the Ornithopters. Really nice. You know, that does take me back. And when I first read it, I thought, this is actually a bit dull, and I've never been a massive fan of Dune. So I guess if you're watching the channel for the first time and I'm slagging off the use of the term sci-fi and saying I find Dune boring, you probably hate me. But, you know, it is what it is. Science fiction is about the imagination and difference and, you know, going beyond. So, you know, you should allow other views in it. That's my view of it. Having a conventional view of science fiction doesn't essentially help anybody. And then, of course, there's the argument about what is conventional. That's fantastic, isn't it? Let's see, that's Vincent de Fate from the anthology It Came from the Drive-In. It's 1996. You see what I mean about how he's not sticking to the 70s. He's just going with whatever he fancies. And I do mind a little bit of artistic license. I mean, I did it myself in 100 must-read science fiction novels. I put 2 short story collections in because the writers are so important. I think it's Ellison and Campbell, because they don't really do novels. Silverberg, Now, this is a terrible cover. Even this Pennington, it's the cover of Time of Changes, and it just doesn't suit the book at all. It's just horrible. I do like the art to have some meaning to the book. That's from the Sphere Jewels of Aptor, which is the first Delaney I read. I like that cover, actually. Really, really good. Excellent stuff. Reread that a while ago, first time in many years. War of the Worlds, George O. Smith sequel to War of the Worlds. Not just into George O. Smith, was it? It was it George O. Smith? It's certainly a Smith. Terrible books in Door. Absolutely dreadful. Don't read it. Stick with the Wells original. Arthur C. Clarke, Time and Stars. I picked up a copy of that in hardcover. About £5 in Cardiff about a year ago. Beautiful Nick. Mushrooms. Yeah, okay. Really, really nice Stableford cover there. I think it's Critical Threshold, I think. Yeah, really, really nice. And that's on a Hamlin. Now, a different cover on the Door one in the States, but lovely. Fantasy Realms. Then, you know, he's moving out of SF into fantasy. Well, you know, if you're going to say SF, stick with it. But he doesn't. He says sci-fi. This picture of Conan, which, of course, is Frazetta. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, that's how I always imagine Conan. Really, really fantastic stuff. You've got to love Frazetta, haven't you, really? And Silver Warriors, aka Phoenix and Obsidian by Michael Moorcock. Great. I haven't got that American edition. I must try and pick that up one day. Then Rodney Matthews, who I'm very fond of. I mean, not represented by anything like his best work here. And we could do with a reissue of a Matthews monograph, really. So, Michael Whelan's Hidden Messages. This is quite interesting, referring to exact things in the text, like that one there, which is quite good. McCaffrey's Dragonflight. Everybody, well, I don't say everybody, a lot of people assume that Dragonflight and that series are a fantasy series. They're not. They're an SF series. They're very much SF. I mean, I have, you know, just had a go at her. The writing's very Catherine Cookson, I think, very sort of romance with a small R in space. But the ideas are really good. It's just that they take a very, very long time to unfold over a massive series. Whereas, you know, I think a really, really good science fiction writer would have put them all in one conceptual breakthrough, quantum punch, and you would have got the revelations earlier, and they'd have had more impact because, I mean, quite honestly, her characterization, description, things like that, they're not front rank. They're very sort of average, really. But she was hugely popular in her time, no longer with us, of course. Richard Hescox, I didn't know much about him. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and these are, see, most of these are from the 80s. So again, stretching it, that's the problem. Sometimes I think it would be nice if a publisher pulled together the covers that an individual publisher imprint has done, like a book on the Pan lozenge would be fantastic, wouldn't it? And I guess those of you who are fans of mine will obviously scream, Steve, you've got to do it, you've got to write the text, blah blah. But and boy, would I love that. Cryptozoology and the paranormal. Okay, well, there you go. So, but it gives you an idea, I guess. It is a nice book. Let's look at Pennington. Fantastic, isn't that great? Really fantastic. I love Pennington stuff. It's got real quality, isn't it? Those Gene Wolfe covers from the early 80s take you right back. And nice end papers. Rodney Matthews there. So that's a look at this book by Adam Rowe, Worlds Beyond Time. And, you know, for me, to be honest, it's kind of a 6 or 7 out of 10. I think it could have been a lot better if he'd stuck to the 70s. You note there's no Jim Burns section in there. Possibly there's a licensing thing. I don't think a lot of it is text. But, you know, if you collect SF art books, there's some cracking stuff in there. There you go. Decide for yourselves. Bye for now.